Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Zevachim daf Lamed Beis, and we're going to start on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis at the new chapter 31b, at the new chapter around 5 lines from the bottom at the Mishnah. So it says the Mishnah, Ko hapsuin sheshachtu shlitasan kshira. Anyone who is disqualified to do the slaughter. Anyone who is disqualified to do service for the Mizbeach, to do any one of the necessary services, nevertheless, the Shlita, if they did it, that would be okay. Meaning to say, even though they're disqualified for the other services of the temple, for the slaughtering of the animal that they're allowed to do. Shlita kshera bezarim, because the slaughtering is kosher, even if you're not a Kohen. A zar is a non-Kohen. Uvinashim, and also with women. A woman is able to do the shlita. And I just want to point out for a second that Tosfos says, and the Gemara proves that women can slaughter even lechatchila, even initially, and that becomes a huge question. Tosfos says, "Mikan tshuva l'masha kasav the hilchos Eretz Yisrael the nashim or yishchatu mipnei shadayta and kala." Says this contradicts what is brought down in an ancient midrash called Hilchos Eretz Yisrael, the laws of Eretz Yisrael, who argue that women should not slaughter because their minds, shadat and kala, their minds are not going to be focused on the slaughtering, and so therefore we see from here a fundamental dispute whether or not women, even initially speaking, can do the shlita. The first halach on the Shulchan Aruch, it says that of the Beis Yosef says, of the Mechaber says that women can do the shlita, and Ramah says that they shouldn't do it because it's our custom not to do it. Ramah writing for Ashkenazim, and Beis Yosef says in response to the Augur who says we never see the women do it. He says the fact that you never saw it is not a proof that the Mechaber Beis Yosef is saying that women can be shochtim even lechatchila, even initially speaking. But back to the text of our Mishnah, it says all of those who are disqualified that slaughter their shlita is kshera. Shlita kshera b'zarim u'v'nashim. The slaughtering is kosher by non-kohanim, by women, ba'avadim, by servants, u'v'tameim, even by people who are tamei, who are ritually impure. V'afilu b'kodesh kadoshim, and even on the holiest of the offerings. As long as if they are tamei, they don't touch the meat. So they have to be careful not to touch the meat, because if they touch the meat, they will make the meat tamei. Normally speaking, we say that food items can only become tamei if they're hochshar l'kabel tuma, if they had received liquid on it. So what kind of liquid has gone on the meat that was just slaughtered? So elsewhere, the Gemara says that it's because of the chavivus of the service, the chavivus of the specialness of the fact that they were sacrificial meat. They were automatically hochsher, automatically capable of becoming tamei. What kind of tamei are we talking about here? Rashi says we're talking about tamei sheret. We're talking about somebody who is tamei from touching a sheret, a rodent. So this person is not going to be tamei the knife, because he's not an avatuma. That's one possibility. Or a second possibility, Tamei says, Rashi says, or he's tamei from a dead body. And even though he would be tamei a knife, we're talking about where his slaughter is not with a knife, but with a kromish shalkana, meaning to say like a very sharp piece of wood. But if it would be a knife, then he wouldn't be able to, because he would tamei, because he would be making the knife tamei, and the knife would make the meat tamei. So, back to the Mishnah. Therefore, all these people, if they slaughter in the Beis Hamikdash, if they slaughter in the Azara, they're going to disqualify it with their improper thought. If they have a pigul thought, they'll disqualify it. And all of them who receive the blood, meaning to say with the improper thought, chutz l'zmano or chutz l'mkomo, with beyond the proper time, beyond the proper place. And yesh dam nefesh, if they have more blood from the neck, then Yachzor Kosher V'Kabel. Since they received it the wrong way, then the kosher Kohen could go back and receive it the right way. All of this is not anything new. We've learned all this before in our tractate. And we did this actually back on 26b. For 2 lines on the top on 32a, Kibel kosher, v'nasam. Let's say the one who was kosher received the blood, gave it to a apostle, gave it to somebody who's not kosher, meaning to say a Kohen can do the halacha, and yachzer kosher. Then you should return it to the kosher Kohen because it didn't become disqualified from the fact that that he gave it to somebody. And Rashi reminds us that we learned in the first chapter on 14b that this, according to the one who says halacha shelo beregel shema alecha l'mar kedisle u'idach kedisle, that this was a discussion that was discussed back on 14b. Kibel b'yamino v'nasal small. Let's say he received in his right hand and he gave it to his left hand. Yachzer b'yamino, he puts it back into his right hand. Kibel b'kli kodesh v'nasal kli chol. He received it in a kli sharis and then he put it into a utensil that's not sacred. Yachzer kli kodesh. He has to return it to the proper utensil. Nishbach min hakli aretz, but if it fell out from the sacred utensil onto the floor, the asafo kosher, the asafo, and then he gathers it up, then we're going to say it's kosher. That because since it was first received in the utensil, it's kosher. Nisanu al gavei hakevesh, if he placed it on the ramp, which is the improper place, or shalo keneged, so he put it at the foot of the altar, but not opposite the base. Or nasan asin nisanu amata l'malvas, nisanu amal l'mata. I say, he put the board in the wrong place. If there is more blood coming straight from the neck, i.e. the dam nefesh, then the kosher Kohen should go back and receive that blood. And again, all this was discussed back on 26b. In this Mishnah, we have seen every line before in the Gemara. So now we go back to the first question, which says, the first part of our Mishnah, which said, all the disqualified people who slaughtered sheshachto, then it's going to be kosher. That implies, says the Gemara, shachto diavadi in lechatchila. That implies that it's kosher if they slaughtered b'diavad. It means to say, ideally, they should, initially speaking, these people shouldn't slaughter, but if they did, it's okay. I should mention there's a Zohar which says that ideally the Kohen should not do the shlita. But anyway, we'll deal with that, God willing, on another occasion. But for now, we see that Gemara says specifically that you shouldn't be, the implication of our mission is that you shouldn't be doing the shlita. Is this really the case? But we have a contradictory brisa. What does the brisa say? V'shachat, it says in the pasuk, v'shachat aspena bakar ofnei Hashem. Shlita b'zar kshera, shlita kshera b'zar munashim avadim t'meim v'afil b'kachim kachim. That it says that shlita is kosher by a non-Kohen, because the shlita is kosher by a non-Kohanim, by women, by servants, by tmeim, and afil b'kachim kachim, even by kachim kachim, most sacred. Oh, el b'kohanim, maybe it's only kosher by Kohanim. Amr svachim bata. Where are you getting this pasuk from? Miklal shenemar, from the fact that it says v'ata uvanecha itcha, you and your sons who are with you, tishmeru es kunaschem. You and your sons who are with you should guard the kuna for everything that relates to the altar. I might think even for slaughtering. You should slaughter it before God. Vikrivo, mikaboa v'elach, means to say v'shachas ben bakar ofnei Hashem vikrivo. Vikrivo refers to the receiving of the blood. So mikaboa v'elach mitzvahs kuhuna. Meaning say that the price is telling us very specifically that the Kohanim are only, it's only a requirement to have the Kohanim from the receiving of the blood onward. And the Shechita is kosher for every single person. And the implication is that even Lechatchila, and so therefore our Mishnah implies to only be the Evid. But since the Brisa says that Torah doesn't need the Kohanim b'shchita, that would imply even Lechatchila you don't need the Kohanim. Whereas our Mishnah says the Evid, Lechatchila you need the Kohanim. It's just the Evid you don't need the Kohanim. So So therefore, the Gemara responds, "Who I didn't do I feel nami?" Really, from our Mishnah is not saying that b'di'evet you should use that a Kohen is really required of chatchila, and b'di'evet and non-Kohen is okay, because really it's the case who I didn't feel nami. Even with chatchila, you could use the people listed in the Mishnah. Mishum the Kabbalah misnei tmeim, but since our Mishnah also wants to teach us the din of tmeim, that a non-Kohen is that a tame, a person is ritually impure, is kosher to do the shlita. That ideally a tame should not do it, and that the Gemara just assumes that way. Because there's a decree that maybe will come to touch the meat, and so since they are initially speaking, we don't want to use a tame, therefore uses that language of whoever slaughtered, which is the language of divi therefore they say shachtu. You have a question, Jeff?
Yeah. Where does the shechita take place?
So the shechita, we'll see. The Gemara is going to discuss that. The Gemara is going to discuss how we could do it. So the Gemara says, the tame di'eved shapir dami. And do you mean to say that a tameh, how is a tameh? Jeff's question: how is the shlita taking place if he's tameh? How could he do it? Viraminu, how could a tameh do the shlita? So didn't we say viraminu v'samach v'shachar? It says that if he lays his hands on the animal and he slaughters smicha b'torim, just like the laying of the hands on the animal has to be done with a kohen who's tahor. Shchita b'torim. So to the shchita has to be done with somebody who's tahor. The Gemara says no, that's midrabanan. Rabbinically, we say it has to be someone who's tahor, but not biblically. And ma'ishna smicha. Why does the Torah say that by tahorim it's biblical? Why? T'chsev l'fnei Hashem. Because it says it has to be done before Hashem, meaning to say in the courtyard. And since the tameh cannot go into the courtyard to eat on the animal, and so therefore the smicha, is biblically speaking, needs to be done by somebody who's tahor. Well, if that's the case, shlita nami haksiv l'fnei Hashem. Also by slaughtering, it says you have to be done before God. So how is he going to be able to do the shlita if he's tameh when he can't go into the courtyard? You can't go into the courtyard if you're tameh. So the Gemara says, no, it is possible. After the aved sakin arucha v'shachet. No, he'll take a long knife. He'll stand outside the courtyard of the temple, and he'll do it with a long knife, and that's how he'll do the shlita. Well, smicha nami after deme'al yadev v'samech. Well, what about smicha? Maybe he'll stand outside the courtyard and he'll stick his hands on the animal. No, that's not going to be okay. Why? Because even if he's just partially in, he's considered to be in, and that's going to be considered like he's invading the space of the temple, and therefore that's a problem if he's tamei. So the shlita you could do while you're tamei, but not the smicha. So Rav Chisda warned it the opposite way. It says the samach v'shachad. It says he leans his hand on the animal and he slaughters. Instead of saying we learn out shlita from smicha, he says we learn out smicha from shlita. Ma shlita b'torin, smicha b'torin. Just like the shlita has to be done only by people who are tahor, also the smicha has to be done only by people who are tahora. Ma'ishna shlita. Why does we say the shlita has to be done by people who are tahor? Because it says before God, the shachat tabachar l'fnei Hashem, and since we need immediately after the smicha shlita, so therefore the smicha has to also be inside. Smicha not mixed with Hashem. So also by smicha it says before God, and so therefore why are you learning out from the shlita when you should learn out from the smicha? I mean, say why do we need to learn out smicha from shlita? Both of them say before God, so therefore clearly both of them need to be by somebody who's tahor. Gemara says no. After the me'al yadev v'samach. No, because smicha you could be standing outside and just stick your hands in. Well, shlita nami after David sakin arucha v'shachad. Also with shlita you could be standing outside with a long knife. The Gemara says, no, this brisa, this position that says that you need to learn out smicha from a comparison with shchita. You can't learn out by itself. Amani Reb Shimon HaTimni. It's the position of Shimon the Timni. The Tanya v'shachar es ben bakar l'fnei Hashem. You shall slaughter the ben bakar l'fnei Hashem. V'lo shochel l'fnei Hashem. The shchita needs to be in the courtyard of the temple, but not the slaughterer. I mean, we see that specifically that shchita needs to be there and not the slaughterer. But Shimon HaTimni disagrees. He says, how do we know that how do we know that also the shochet needs to be in the azara? Shochet is ben bakar, that the one who slaughters the ben bakar yelafnei Hashem, and so therefore we see from here that the shochet needs to be standing before God. So according to this brisa, the shochet needs to be standing in the courtyard, and you couldn't do it if you're tamei. So the Gemara says, since we're discussing this question of whether or not we say bia b'mikta shmei bia, that partial entrance is considered an entrance, the Gemara is going to challenge this idea that we see that partial entrance is considered entrance. Gemara says, Amar Ua Reish Lakish taught, Tamei sheyachnas yado lefneim. Okay, let's say somebody who's tamei, and he just sticks his hand into the courtyard, he's going to get lashes, because it says v'chol kodesh lo tiga. It says you can't touch anything that's sacred. And you can't come into the temple. Makish pio and agia. We compare the coming into the temple to the touching. Not agia but mix. It's just like when you touch something, it's just a portion of you. And shma nagia. Managia but mix. Shma nagia. Apia but mix. Shma bia. So the two partial entrances called entrance. Excuse me. So that's what Ula's position is. That bia but mix is considered miktas. Bia. Partial entrance is called entrance. So Esrei Rav Hoshaya Ula. So Rav Hoshaya challenges Ula from the brisa that deals with a mitzora. We know a mitzora, he has to go and immerse in the mikvah after he was pure for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, he's not yet done. He waits till nightfall and comes the 8th day after he first immersed in the mikvah. And then he has to stand there on the 8th day of his purification, and he has to bring sacrifices. And but what he does is he puts a portion of his body into the courtyard to receive some of the blood from the asham and the oil on his right lobe of his ear and on his right thumb and on his right big toe. So mitzora, so let's say you have this mitzora shachal, shmini shalo, who's on his 8th day, which is the day that he's going to go into the Temple Mount, to stick his hands and his legs. He's in what's called the Ezras Nashim. He goes through the women's courtyard, and now he stands under the gate of Nicanor, which is the passageway from the women's section into it's not the women's section, it's the place where even women are allowed to go, and also the Israelim are allowed to go. And he sticks his hand from there into the Azara, so he could get the blood placed on himself. So let's say that happens, Mitzvah Shachal Shmini Shalo Yos Pesach. But now let's say that happens, his 8th day, where he's about to have the blood put on him, comes on the eve of Pesach, the Ra Kari Bo Bayom, and he sees an emission that day from his body, a emission of seed, Bitavo, and he immerses in the mikvah. So now, typically speaking, somebody who needed to immerse from Kari had to wait according to nightfall to go in to the temple, to the Azara. Even though, generally speaking, somebody else who's immersed that day from Kari does not go into the Temple Mount, to the courtyard, because there's 3 levels. There's the Machane Shechina, which is the courtyard. There's the Machane Levia, which is the Temple Mount, and then there's Machane Yisrael, which is all of Jerusalem. So even though typically speaking, the person who is Tameh, and then from Keri and he immersed in the mikveh does not go into the Machane Levia because he's like a Zav, and he therefore can't even go to the Machane Levia, the Temple Mount at all. And even though he immersed in the mikveh, the Tanas of the position that the Tvul Yom of a Zav is like a Zav. So he shouldn't be allowed to go into the Temple Mount. But nevertheless, in this case, this person who's also a Mitzorah and he needs to go there anyway to get the blood placed on him, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to eat from the Korban Pesach without having the completion of his ritual of the Mitzorah. Nechnas, he is allowed to go into the Har Bayis so that he can become purified from his Mitzorah and he can eat from his Pesach. And why can he go? Mutav Yavo Aseh, because we're going to allow the positive commandment to be in Korban Pesach, Sheish Bokaris. If he doesn't eat it, he gets lashes. V'yitchei Aseh, She'im Bokaris. And he'll override the positive commandment of a Baal Keri not to go into the Temple Mount where there's no kares. Rabbi Yochanan says he disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with this price. It's a question, how could he disagree with the price? And maybe it's a different text. But anyway, Rabbi Yochanan says, Devar Torah afilu same. There's not even a positive commandment against a person who has a Tvul Yom from the Keri. Shenemar, how do we know that he's allowed? Vayamo Yoshafat b'kal Yudav Yerushalayim b'Beis Hashem l'fnei hachatzer chadasha. Says that Yoshaphat stood, and when they went back to the to Jerusalem after the exile, so these psukim are describing that there's a war with Bnei Moab and Bnei Ammon against Yoshaphat, and Sheva Yehuda and the king gathered there in the temple to request victory. And it says that Yeshua stood there in the house of God before the new courtyard. And so the pshat is that they strengthened the courtyard. But what does it mean? That they taught new things that day. What were the new things that they taught? They said, that they say that they made a new halacha, that they said that this is just a rabbinic law. And so therefore, it's not even a positive commandment that the Tvul Yom cannot go on the Temple Mount. It's from a Keri, it's a rabbinic law. So now Mark concludes this question. If you're going to say that partial entrance is called entrance, how can this Mitzorah, who's a Baal Keri, put his hands into the courtyard to get the application of the blood? Because going onto the Temple Mount, okay, maybe that's a positive commandment without kares, or maybe it's a rabbinic commandment, but going into the courtyard of the temple, that there is a kares penalty. So because that's into the Machane Shechina, so how could that override the Pesach? That's a positive commandment, which has kares, which is the same level as the Korban Pesach. So how is he able to do it? So Amarle, so meaning to say must be that partial entrance is not entrance. Bia b'mitzvah says lo shmei bia. So Ua responds to Rav Hoshaya, mitunach. So Ua responds to Rav Hoshaya from meaning to say from your burden, I'll go back at you and make a burden against you. Meaning to say from your question, I'll question you. Shani mitzora ho v'hutar utzarasa hutar l'kirio. How anyways is the mitzora putting his hands into the temple if he's anyways going to be tamei? He's not. He's not completely purified. So even though he's mechusar kippurim, generally speaking, somebody who's mechusar kippurim cannot enter into the courtyard. He's allowed to stick partial his hands in. That's the way it was done. And so therefore, since he's allowed to do it, so therefore we're also going to allow the one who is tamei from Tvul Yom to go in that day. Amar Rav Yosef kasaver ua. Yeah, or in the morning, the 14th. So it says Rav Yosef kasaver ua from Ua's position that since the Mitzorah can go in to get purified, so too the Baal Keri. We learn from here a different law, because it says by the Korban Pesach that if the majority of the people are tamei, then they can bring the Korban Pesach in a state of tumah. But that's only if they are tamei from a dead body. But if they are tamei from a zav, then it does not override the korban pesachim proper. From Ula's position, we see Ruban zavim v'nasu tameim mesim, that if the majority of the people would have been tamei from a zav, but then they became tamei from a dead body, then we would say Hol v'hutra to utumason hutru was zivasan. Once they're being allowed to purify the more severe tumah of a dead body, we're also going to say that since they're allowed to bring in a state of ritual impurity from their dead body, they're also going to be allowed to do it in their state of ziva, and that's the chiddush that the Gemara is going to be talking about in tomorrow's daf. But we'll stop here. That this is what Rav Yosef wants to say. That since from Ula's position, since one thing is already being allowed, it's going to be allowed for this. Since we say a bigger chiddush or another chiddush, since they be allowed to be purified from the dead body. So if they're tumas from a zav and then they became tumah from a dead body, we'll say that they could also overriding the tumah of the zav once they're overriding the tumah of the dead body. Okay, we'll stop here, Baruch Hashem, and we'll be back to our typical schedule. Shkoyach.